Elias Wren had always dreamed of discovering new flowers. Since he was a boy, he loved to walk through fields and forests, collecting seeds and drawing every petal he found. That dream took him far from Earth, all the way to the edge of the Andromeda frontier. Now he was lying face down in the mud of a strange alien jungle, gasping for breath. Smoke rose from the broken wreck of his small exploration pod behind him. Sparks popped and wires dangled like dead vines. Elias pushed himself, up with shaking arms. His head spun, but he forced himself to stay awake. He looked around. The air shimmered with soft blue light. Huge plants towered over him, their leaves wide like sails, covered in tiny dots of bioluminescence. Strange flowers glowed gently in. The shadows, their petals opening and closing as if they were breathing. Elias touched the pouch strapped to his belt. It was still there. Inside were tiny seed samples he had collected on other worlds. Even now, with pain in his leg and blood, on his forehead he smiled. He had survived the crash. Maybe he could find something beautiful here too. He limped forward, using a broken branch as a cane. Every step sent pain shooting through his knee, but he kept going. He had to find shelter before the twin suns set behind the jungle canopy. After an hour of walking, he reached a small clearing. In the center grew a cluster of flowers unlike any he had ever seen. They were tall, with petals like crystal, shining with colors that changed every few seconds: blue, green, violet, gold. When the wind blew through them, they made a soft, musical hum. Elias knelt beside the flowers. He reached out and touched a petal. It was warm, almost alive. The flower bent gently toward his hand, brushing his skin. "Amazing," he whispered. He took out his old notebook and began to sketch. Quickly, ignoring the pain in his leg, he wrote down every detail: the shape, the colors, the smell, which was sweet and soft, like honey. As he worked, he didn't see the shapes moving in the trees behind him. Silent figures crawled along thick branches. Their dark eyes glowed, faintly. They watched him carefully, chittering in a language no human had ever heard. Elias heard something, a rustle, a faint hiss. He looked up too late. Before he could stand, long insect-like limbs wrapped around his shoulders. He dropped his notebook as 3 more shapes landed around him. They were tall, taller than any human, and covered in smooth, chitin-like armor that shimmered green in the jungle light. Their eyes were wide and black, reflecting the glow of the flowers. Elias froze. He knew he should struggle, but something in the way the creatures moved told him it was useless. They did not hurt him. Instead, they lifted him easily, like he, weighed nothing, and carried him toward the deepest part of the jungle. The clearing disappeared behind him. The flowers faded into the shadows. Elias felt his heart pounding, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic would not help him now. They moved swiftly through the twisting paths. More strange flowers brushed against Elias's arms as he passed. Some opened wide, releasing soft motes of glowing pollen that drifted into the night air. Insects, bigger than his hand, buzzed overhead but never touched him. After what felt like hours, they reached a wide cave hidden behind thick curtains of vines. The cave mouth glowed with a soft green light. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly, as if they were alive. The creatures carried Elias inside. The air smelled sweet, mixed with a sharper scent he couldn't place. He realized the walls were covered with the same glowing flowers he saw in the clearing, but these were larger, their roots buried deep in the living stone. They brought him to a chamber so large it made Elias gasp. It was shaped like a dome, with high walls and a ceiling covered in hanging blossoms. Some flowers floated gently in pools of glowing water. In the center of the chamber, on a raised platform of crystal and vines, sat a figure unlike the others. She was tall and graceful, her body half hidden by flowing petal-like robes that seemed to grow from her own flesh. Her eyes were deep and silver, catching every glimmer of light. A crown of living flowers circled her head, blooming and closing in slow waves. Elias felt the creatures lower him to his knees. He wanted to stand, but his injured leg gave way. He stayed kneeling, staring at the figure in awe. She looked at him with curiosity, her head tilting slightly. This must be their leader, he thought. Or maybe their queen. One of the insect warriors stepped forward and spoke in clicks and soft hisses. The queen listened silently, her eyes never leaving Elias. When the warrior finished, she raised one slender hand. The warrior stepped back, at once, bowing low. Elias swallowed. He took a breath and spoke in a quiet voice. "My name is Elias Wren," he said. "I'm an explorer. I didn't mean to intrude." The queen did not answer with words. Instead, she leaned forward and studied him closely, her silver eyes reflecting his image like tiny mirrors. Then she lifted her hand again. One of the warriors stepped forward and held out Elias's notebook. They must have picked it up from the clearing. The queen opened the book. She turned the pages slowly, studying his drawings of flowers from other worlds. When she reached the last page, the quick sketch of her own jungle's flowers, she paused. For a moment, Elias thought he saw something change in her eyes like a faint light. She closed the book and set it gently beside her. Then she spoke, not in clicks, but in a soft, musical voice that echoed through the chamber. Elias could not understand the words, but her tone was calm, not angry. He did not know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just an explorer. He was now part of something much larger, a hidden world beneath flowers more beautiful than any he had ever seen. And somewhere deep inside, Elias felt a strange hope bloom. Maybe, just maybe, these flowers were not the only things that could grow here. Elias Wren woke up to a soft humming sound. At first, he thought it was the wind moving through the strange jungle flowers, but when he opened his eyes, he saw he was still inside the glowing hive. He was lying on a bed made of smooth vines and giant petals. The air smelled sweet and fresh. Light came from the flowers growing on the walls and ceiling. They pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Elias sat up slowly. His leg still hurt, but it was wrapped neatly with green leaves that gave off a cool feeling. He touched them and realized they were alive. The leaves closed gently around his fingers, then opened again. A soft clicking noise made him look up. One of the insect warriors was watching him from the entrance of his small chamber. Its black eyes blinked slowly. When Elias tried to stand, the warrior lifted one long arm, telling him to wait. Moments later, two more warriors appeared. They moved without sound, stepping over roots and flowers like shadows. They stood on either side of Elias's bed and waited. Elias understood. They wanted him to follow. He pushed himself up carefully. One warrior stepped closer and offered an arm to help him walk. Elias was surprised at how gentle the touch felt, even though the creature's arm was covered in hard chitin. They led him down a tunnel lined with living flowers. The walls glowed brighter as they walked. Sometimes, small creatures scurried by, tiny insect drones carrying drops of glowing nectar or pieces of soft moss. Finally, they reached the grand chamber again. It looked even more beautiful now. Hundreds of flowers hung like stars above him. Pools of crystal water reflected the lights like mirrors. Warriors and workers moved quietly along the edges, always careful not to disturb the blossoms. In the center sat the alien queen, Scifi, though Elias did not know her name yet. She sat tall and calm on her throne of vines and crystal. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the soft light. Her living crown of flowers bloomed slowly around her head like a halo. When Elias entered, Scifi turned her gaze toward him. For a moment he felt small, like a child standing before a goddess, but then she tilted her head slightly, as if inviting him closer. The warriors guided him forward. Elias stopped a few steps away from her throne. He looked up and tried to hide his fear. His heart beat fast, but he forced himself to speak. "My name is Elias Wren," he said softly. "I am from Earth. I didn't mean to come here. I crashed. I only wanted to study your flowers." Seraphira did not reply right away. Instead, she lifted her hand, and one of her drones stepped forward with Elias's notebook. She opened it again, flipping through his drawings. She traced one petal sketch with a slender finger. Her touch left a faint glow on the page. Elias watched, holding his breath. He wondered if she could understand his writing, or if she only saw pictures. Then, to his surprise, Seraphira looked at him and spoke. Her voice was soft and clear, not human, but somehow gentle. "You draw flowers," she said. The Mai. Words were slow, broken, but perfect enough for Elias to understand. "Yes," Elias said quickly, amazed she could speak any human language at all. "I draw them. I study them. They help me see beauty and life." Seraphira's silver eyes narrowed slightly. She repeated, "Beauty? Life." Elias nodded. He pointed at the glowing blossoms above them. "These flowers, they are beautiful. They are alive. They are special. Like you." The warriors behind him shifted at his words. Elias realized they were tense. Maybe it was wrong to speak so freely. Maybe they thought he was disrespectful. But Seraphira did not look angry. She looked curious. Slowly, a faint light came to her lips. A smile, small but clear. The warriors froze in surprise. A few exchanged quick clicks and soft hisses. Elias noticed they seemed shocked. Did they not smile? Did their queen never smile? Elias felt hope spark inside him. Maybe he could help them understand him. Maybe he could show them he meant no harm. He carefully took a step closer. He saw the warriors shift but did not stop. He touched his chest. "Human," he said. Then he pointed at her. "Queen." Seraphira's eyes seemed to shine brighter. She tapped her chest with one slender hand. "Seraphira," she said softly. Elias smiled back. "Seraphira," he repeated. "Beautiful name." A faint light flushed through the flowers of her crown, blooming wider. It was like they reacted to her emotions. The warriors seemed confused but stayed silent. Seraphira leaned forward. She looked deeply into Elias's eyes. Then she spoke slowly, as if tasting every word. "Why? You here?" Elias breathed out. He had waited for this question. He knew. He must answer honestly. He pointed at the flowers again, then spread his arms wide to show the whole hive. "I study flowers," he said. "I find beauty. I learn. I share. I want to know more." Seraphira touched one of the glowing vines at her side. It curled around her fingers like a pet snake. "Flowers, you love?" Elias laughed softly. "Yes, I love them. They remind me of hope." He did not know if she understood the word hope, but when he said it, the flowers on her crown shimmered again, bright and soft. Then Seraphira raised her hand and spoke in her own language. Clicks and hums. The warriors bowed low and stepped back into the shadows. Elias was alone with the queen. She stood up slowly and stepped down from her throne. She was taller than him by a full head. Up close, Elias saw tiny lines of light running along her skin, like veins of liquid crystal. Seraphira walked around him, studying him as if he was a strange flower himself. She stopped behind him, touched his injured leg with gentle fingers. The pain eased a little, as if her touch told the flowers in the bandages to heal him faster. Elias turned his head slightly. "Thank you," he whispered. She stepped back in, front of him. She lifted her hand, and for the first time, she touched his cheek. Her fingers were cool and soft, yet strong. She looked at him closely, eyes shining silver. "You stay," Seraphira said, her voice calm but firm. Elias felt a shiver of fear and wonder. He understood. He was no longer just a visitor or a prisoner. The Queen wanted him here, to study him, maybe to learn from him, or maybe for something more. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "I stay." Seraphira's lips curved again, the smallest smile, but real. The flowers above them bloomed wider, filling the chamber with gentle light. For the first time in a long time, the alien queen felt something she had never known. And Elias, standing in a hive of living flowers, felt that maybe, just maybe, he had found something more beautiful than any flower he had ever seen. Elias Wren had been in the hive for many days now. He no longer counted time by the rise and fall of the twin suns. Instead, he watched the slow blooming of the flowers that covered the walls and ceilings. Each day they opened wider when the alien queen, Seraphira, came near him. At first, the insect warriors watched him every moment. 2 stood outside the small room where he slept. They followed him when he walked through the tunnels, their black eyes always fixed on him. But as the days passed, they stepped back a little, staying in the shadows. Elias did not try to run away. Where would he go? The jungle outside was endless, and his broken pod was useless now. Besides, he did not want to leave. There was too much beauty here. Flowers that glowed with colors he had never seen, vines that moved when touched, and pools of water that sang when drops fell in. Each morning, Seraphira called for him. Warriors would appear at his doorway, clicking softly, to tell him it was time. He would follow them to the grand chamber, where she waited on her living throne. Seraphira did not speak much. She listened. She watched. She touched his notebook, turning the pages again and again. She liked the pictures of Earth's flowers, roses, lilies, wild daisies in open fields. Sometimes she would point at one and ask a word. "Rose?" "She," said once, her voice soft but clear. Elias smiled. "Yes, Rose." Seraphira repeated it slowly. "Rose." Then she pointed at a flower blooming beside her, a giant blossom with petals like crystal flames. "Name?" she asked. Elias laughed gently. "I don't know," he said. "No human has seen it before. Maybe you can name it." She tilted her head, thoughtful. She touched the flower's petal, and it shivered under her fingers. Elias felt less like a prisoner and more like a guest now. Seraphira gave him freedom to walk through parts of the hive. He found that the tunnels were alive. Roots and vines curled around him as he passed, lights blooming when he touched them. Sometimes, small drones approached him. They were no bigger than cats, with soft, glowing eyes. They carried nectar, moss, or tiny flowers. They liked to rest on his shoulders or follow him as he drew in his notebook. One day, Seraphira asked him to come to a new chamber. It was larger than the others, filled with huge flowers hanging from the ceiling like lanterns. In the middle, pools of clear water reflected the blossoms above. Seraphira stood waiting for him, her crown of living flowers blooming wide. She raised her hand, and Elias stepped forward carefully. She touched the surface of the pool with her fingers. The water rippled and turned bright blue. Shapes formed on the water's surface, small images, moving like a living painting. Elias leaned closer. He saw the hive, the tunnels, the pools, the warriors moving through the jungle, Above, it was like a map, alive and changing. Seraphira looked at him. "Hive is me," she said slowly. Elias's eyes widened. "You control it?" he asked. Seraphira nodded once. She touched her chest, and then the pool again. The images shifted. Flowers bloomed wider, warriors moved faster. A part of her mind touched every vine and petal. Elias understood then. The flowers and the hive were not just her home. They were part of her. Her emotions shaped them. Her thoughts guided the warriors. She was the heart of this living city. Seraphira stepped closer to him. She placed her hand over his chest. "You heart?" she asked, searching for the right word. Elias touched her hand gently. "Yes," he said softly. "Humans have hearts. They feel many things. Happiness, sadness, love." Seraphira's eyes glowed faintly. "Love," she repeated, tasting the word. She looked at the flowers around them. They opened wider, glowing softly. Elias sat on the edge of the pool. He took out his notebook and drew simple shapes: a heart, a flower, a smile. He showed her how humans wrote words for feelings. Seraphira knelt beside him. Her crown's blossoms touched his shoulder. She watched every line he drew. Sometimes she reached out, tracing a shape with her fingers. For hours they sat like that, human and alien queen, teaching and learning without fear. When Elias grew tired, Seraphira ordered drones to bring soft nectar drinks and sweet fruits. She watched him eat, curious about every small human thing. The warriors who guarded her throne stood at the edges of the chamber. They clicked softly to each other. They had never seen their queen so calm, so gentle. They whispered that she was changing, and it made them uneasy. But none dared to stop her. One night, after many days, Elias sat alone by a pool near his room. He watched the glowing water and thought about Earth. He missed it. The blue sky, the smell of rain, the sound of birds. But he knew he could not go back now. His pod was broken, and no rescue would come this deep into the Andromeda frontier. He heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Seraphira. She stood under the flowers, her crown glowing like a ring of tiny stars. She sat beside him without a word. For a while they watched the water together. Then Seraphira spoke in a soft voice. "Why, flowers?" Elias looked at her, surprised. He thought for a moment, then answered simply. "Flowers remind me, life is short but beautiful. They bloom for a while, then they fade. But while they bloom, they make the world better." Seraphira turned her head slightly. Her silver eyes reflected the glowing pool. "You bloom?" she asked. Elias laughed gently. "Maybe. Humans? We bloom too. We live. We love. We make things beautiful if we can." Seraphira was quiet. Then she touched one of the flowers beside the pool. It opened wide, releasing tiny glowing seeds into the air. They drifted around them like fireflies. She looked at Elias and did something no warrior could believe. She smiled again, a real smile, soft and warm. Elias felt his heart beat faster. He looked at her and whispered, "You're more beautiful than those flowers." Seraphira did not answer, but the flowers on her crown bloomed wider than ever. The seeds drifted around, them floating like tiny stars in the dark hive. In that moment, Elias knew something was growing between them, something no human or alien had felt before, and deep inside the hive, the flowers kept blooming. Elias Wren woke early, long before the hive's flowers opened for the day. He sat by the pool near his small room and dipped his fingers into the glowing water. Ripples of light spread across the surface, soft and calm. He thought about Earth. again. He wondered if anyone there still looked for him. Maybe his name was on a list of lost explorers. Maybe a rescue ship would come. But deep inside, he knew no one would find him here, not in this hidden world under the living jungle. Soft clicking sound broke his thoughts. He looked up and saw Scifi standing at the entrance. Her crown of flowers glowed faintly in the early light. She stepped closer, her silver eyes warm and curious. "You dream?" she asked softly. Elias smiled. "Sometimes I dream of Earth, my home." Scifi sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The flowers above them opened, dropping tiny petals into the pool. "Home," Scifi repeated. "Do you wish to go back?" Elias did not answer right away. He looked at her. The way her crown bloomed wider when she felt calm. The way her eyes reflected the soft glow of the hive. "I don't know," he said honestly. "This place, it feels like home too." Scifi looked at him for a long moment. A small smile touched her lips. The flowers on her crown shimmered brighter. Before she could speak again, a warrior drone ran into the chamber. It clicked and hissed in a sharp voice. Elias could not understand the words, but he saw how Scifi's smile faded. Her flowers closed a little. She stood up quickly and motioned for Elias to follow. He got to his feet and limped after her. As she moved through the tunnels, more warriors joined them, whispering to each other with worried clicks. Scifi led Elias to a high platform deep in the hive. From here, a wide tunnel opened to the jungle above. Bright light poured in through the leaves. Elias shaded his eyes and stepped forward to see what the warriors were watching. Above the canopy in the blue sky, he saw shapes, metal ships, large and cold, moving like shadows across the sun. They were not alive like Scifi's hive. They were human machines. Elias felt his chest tighten. He knew these ships. They belonged to the mining syndicates, companies that traveled to distant worlds and stripped them bare for profit. He had seen them before, tearing planets apart for fuel and metals. "They found my beacon," he whispered. He realized the crash pod's emergency signal must have stayed active, calling not a rescue, but people who came for resources, not life. Scifi looked at him sharply. "Danger?" she asked. Elias nodded. "They don't care about flowers. They only care about taking. They will destroy the jungle, the hive. You." Scifi turned to her warriors. She spoke in fast, sharp clicks. They bowed low and scattered through the tunnels, carrying her orders. She looked at Elias again. "What do?" Elias thought hard. He knew these syndicate people. They respected only money and force. If they saw the flowers, they would want to harvest them for energy or sell them as luxury goods. If they saw the hive, they would see only a chance for profit. "I have to talk to them," Elias said. "Maybe I can stop them." Scifi tilted her head. "You speak for us?" "Yes," Elias said firmly. "They won't listen to you. They won't listen to your warriors. But maybe they will listen to me." Scifi was quiet for a moment. Then she lifted her hand and touched his cheek, the same way she had done when they first met. Her fingers were cool and soft, but there was a sadness in her touch now. "Be safe," she said slowly. Elias nodded. "I will come back." Warriors led him up to the jungle clearing. The bright suns shone down through the huge petals above. He stepped into the light and waited. Not long after, a group of syndicate soldiers in heavy suits pushed through the undergrowth. They carried guns and wore masks. Behind them stood a tall man with sharp eyes and a clean uniform, the leader, Elias. "Ren," the leader said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "We found your signal. Thought we'd find wreckage. Didn't expect to find you alive." Elias stayed calm. "Turn back," he said. This world is not yours. There's life here. Intelligent life. If you dig here, you'll destroy something beautiful." The leader laughed. "Beautiful doesn't pay bills, Wren. Your flowers, they're worth millions. Bioluminescent compounds, healing nectar, maybe energy too. The syndicate thanks you for finding it." Elias stepped forward. "Please, I know you. I worked with your kind before. This place is not for sale. The people here, they will defend it." The leader looked at the jungle. "People? Bugs, you mean?" He spat on the ground. "We'll clear them out, or burn the jungle down if we must. You're coming with us." Two soldiers grabbed Elias's arms roughly. He struggled, but they held him tight. He saw the leader giving orders. Drones flew up from their ships, scanning the canopy for the hive's hidden tunnels. Elias's heart raced. He had to warn Seraphira. He had to do something, anything, to stop them. As they dragged him toward their ship, he kicked at the ground, grabbing a handful of soft petals that fell from the glowing flowers. He crushed them in his palm, hoping the hive's flowers would sense him, hoping Seraphira would know. Before the soldiers could stop him, he whispered into the wind, "Seraphira, please, be ready." The flowers on the trees shivered. High. Above, hidden drones of the hive watched everything. They carried the queen's silent promise back through the jungle, back to the heart of the hive. Seraphira stood in her throne room, eyes closed, her crown blooming wide. Her warriors gathered around her, waiting for her command. For the first time, she was not calm like stone. For the first time, her flowers glowed bright with anger and hope. Elias would not fight alone. The hive would stand with him. Elias Wren felt the cold grip of the soldiers on his arms as they pushed him up the ramp of the syndicate's landing ship. The inside smelled of oil and metal, so different from the sweet living scent of Seraphira's hive. They pushed him into a small holding room and locked the heavy door behind him. The walls were metal and bare. A single light flickered above his head. He sat down on the floor and took a deep breath, trying to calm his shaking hands. He could not stop thinking about Seraphira. He could almost see her silver eyes, calm and watchful. He remembered the soft touch of her hand on his cheek, the way the flowers bloomed wider when she smiled. "Hold on, Seraphira," he whispered. "I'll find a way." He looked around the room. There were no windows, only the thick door and a small air vent near the ceiling. The walls hummed softly, the sound of the ship's engines getting ready for takeoff. Elias reached into his pocket. He still had a few petals from the glowing flowers, the ones he had crushed when the soldiers grabbed him. He hoped Seraphira's hive could still sense him somehow. He needed her now more than ever. Suddenly, he felt something warm against his fingers. He looked down. The petals were glowing faintly, tiny sparks of blue light dancing in his palm. A smile touched his lips. He knew what he had to do. He stood up and reached for the air vent. It was small, but big enough for him to push the glowing petals through. He broke the petals into tiny pieces and fed them into the vent, one by one. "Find her," he whispered to the pieces of flower. "Show her where I am." The petals drifted into the ship's air system. Elias could only hope that somewhere, outside, Seraphira's flowers would sense their lost pieces and guide the hive to him. Outside the ship, the syndicate's workers were busy unloading machines and cutting tools. Small crawler robots moved through the jungle, collecting samples of glowing vines and flowers. Soldiers stood guard, guns ready, as drones hovered overhead, scanning for threats. But the jungle was not quiet. Hidden among the huge flowers and twisting roots, Seraphira's warriors watched every move. They stayed perfectly still, blending with the living plants. Inside her hive, Seraphira stood tall in her throne room. The flowers on her crown glowed a deep, strong blue, the color of focus and power. Around her, her strongest warriors waited for her word. A small drone approached her and bowed. It dropped a single petal at her feet, a piece of the flower Elias had crushed. Scifi picked it up and held it close to her face. It glowed bright in her hand. She closed her eyes. Through the petal, she felt him, his fear, his hope, his promise. Her silver eyes opened. She raised her arms high, and the flowers on her crown bloomed wide, shining like stars in the dark. Scifi spoke in a clear, strong voice. Her language was clicks and hums, but its meaning was simple. We protect our own. As the Syndicate's machines roared to life, something moved. In the trees. At first, it was only shadows slipping between the giant blossoms. Then the flowers themselves opened wide, releasing soft, glowing spores that drifted on the wind. A crawler robot rolled over a patch of vines. The vines shivered, then snapped to life, wrapping around its wheels. Sparks flew as the machine struggled, but the vines squeezed tighter until the crawler's lights died. The soldiers shouted orders. They fired into the jungle, but they could not see what to shoot. The jungle itself seemed to move. Inside the landing ship, Elias heard the alarms. Red lights flashed above him. He pounded on the door. "Let me out! You can't fight them! You don't understand!" No one came. He backed away from the door, searching for anything he could use. His eyes fell on a loose panel on the wall. He pulled at it with all his strength until it broke free. Inside were tangled wires and blinking lights. He remembered something Scifi had shown him, how the hive's flowers could release spores, that short-circuited machines. He still had some of the glowing petals in his pocket. He pressed them against the wires and crushed them. Tiny sparks of blue light flickered. A second later, the lights in the room flickered too. The hum of the engines faded. Somewhere deep inside the ship, something popped and hissed. The door clicked. Elias threw his shoulder into it. It swung open, and he stumbled into the main corridor. Sirens wailed. He ran toward the exit ramp, ducking, behind crates when soldiers appeared. He could hear shouting outside, the crackle of guns, the sharp hiss of Scifi's warriors moving through the jungle. At the ramp, he saw the Syndicate's leader barking orders. Soldiers fired into the trees, but the flowers closed around their bullets like soft armor. Vines dropped from the canopy, pulling weapons away. Scifi's warriors burst from the shadows, their long limbs moving like blades of grass in the wind. Elias took a deep breath and stepped out into the chaos. He ran for the clearing, calling out, "Scifi, I'm here!" He stumbled over fallen branches and broken machines. A crawler exploded behind him as the hive's vines ripped through its engine. Then he saw her, Scifi, standing tall at the edge of the clearing. She was surrounded by her strongest warriors. The flowers. On her crown glowed bright as fire. Their eyes met. For a moment, the battle fell away. She raised her hand toward him. Elias ran to her side. One of her warriors moved in front of him, blocking a Syndicate soldier's shot. The bullet hit the warrior's armor and bounced off like a stone thrown at a tree. Scifi stepped closer. She touched Elias's face with both hands, her eyes soft but fierce. "Safe," she said simply. Elias nodded. He turned and looked at the Syndicate leader. The man's face was pale now. He barked more orders, but his soldiers were backing away. The jungle was alive, and it would not let them win. The hive's warriors moved like a river sweeping through the clearing. Flowers opened wide, releasing clouds of glowing spores that shut down drones and machines. Elias and Scifi stood together as the Syndicate's last crawler fell silent. The remaining soldiers threw down their weapons and ran for their ships. The leader glared at Elias one last time before he too turned and fled into the trees. Silence fell over the jungle. The only sound was the gentle hum of the living flowers, blooming wider now, free and bright. Scifi looked at Elias. She did not speak. She did not need to. Together, they had defended the hive, not just with force, but with trust and hope, and the soft power of something beautiful that could not be bought or broken. When the last syndicate ship lifted off and disappeared into the sky, silence returned to the jungle. The giant flowers slowly closed their petals again, resting after the fight. Vines untangled from broken crawler robots and coiled back into the ground. Elias Wren stood at the edge of the clearing, breathing hard. His clothes were torn and his hands were scratched, but he was alive, and so was the hive. Beside him stood Scifi, tall and calm, her silver eyes watching the twin suns rising through the trees. Her crown of flowers opened wide in the soft light. The colors danced gently, blue, pink, violet, gold, alive and peaceful. Elias looked at her and smiled. "We did it," he said softly. Scifi turned her eyes to him. "Safe," she said. Her voice was quiet, but sure. Warriors gathered around them, carrying pieces of broken machines and scattered weapons. Some drones hovered overhead, dropping soft spores onto the damaged plants, helping the jungle heal where the syndicate's machines had torn the ground. Elias looked at the broken crawler nearby. "They'll come back," he said. "Maybe not today, but someday. They'll send more ships." Scifi's eyes narrowed. "We protect," she said calmly. She touched a vine at her feet, and the ground trembled softly. The hive was alive, always ready to grow stronger. Elias nodded. He knew she was right, but he also knew they could not hide forever. Someday, someone would come who would not run so easily. He stepped closer to her. "You need to be ready. You need to know more. I can help you. I can teach you what humans know, what they want, how they think." Scifi tilted her head. "You stay?" she asked, her voice softer now. Elias looked around, at the bright flowers, the warriors, the living vines and glowing pools. He thought about Earth, so far away now. He thought about what he would miss. Blue skies, open fields, simple human things. But when he looked at Scifi, standing tall among her blooming crown, he knew he was already home. "Yes," he said. "I'll stay, if you want me to." Scifi's eyes softened. She stepped closer until they stood so near that Elias could feel the warmth of the living crown above her. Slowly, she raised her hand and touched his cheek, tracing the small scar near his eyebrow, the mark from his crash landing. Then, for the first time, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead gently to his. For her kind, this was not just a greeting. It was a bond, a promise. When she pulled back, the flowers above them burst open wide, scattering tiny, glowing seeds into the air. The seeds drifted like soft stars, dancing around them in the new morning light. Elias laughed softly. "You really are more beautiful than those flowers," he whispered. Scifi did not speak. She only smiled, and the living hive around them glowed brighter. Days turned into weeks. Elias began to walk freely through the hive, teaching where he could. He showed Scifi's drones how to copy human words more clearly, so they could listen to human signals from space. He taught the warriors how to build small barriers at the jungle's edge, not to attack, but to hide the hive's heart better. He helped Scifi learn more words in his language. Some nights, they sat by the glowing pools together. He drew pictures in his old notebook, while Scifi traced the lines with her slender fingers, learning slowly, carefully. One evening, he found her waiting for him near the grand chamber. The crown of flowers above her glowed with soft blue light. She held something in her hands, a small crystal seed shaped like a tear. She placed it in Elias's palm. Yours, she said. Elias looked at it closely. What is it? Seraphira touched his chest gently. New bloom, she said. Your seed, your flower. You stay, you grow here. Elias felt something warm in his chest. He closed his fingers around the tiny seed. Thank you, he said softly. She led him to a hidden part of the hive, deep under the roots of the oldest tree. There, in a quiet cave of glowing vines, Seraphira planted the crystal seed with her own hands. She pressed Elias's hand into the soft earth beside hers. When they pulled back, a faint light pulsed under the soil, a promise of a new flower, a living part of the hive, forever linked to Elias. More time passed. Elias watched the hive grow, stronger. The flowers bloomed brighter. The drones learned to speak more words. The warriors moved deeper into the jungle, planting hidden blossoms that would watch the sky for new threats. He spent his days studying new flowers with Seraphira. Sometimes she asked him about Earth, and he told her simple stories. Green, fields, children playing, rain falling on stone roads. She listened quietly, her crown blooming wide with every new piece of his lost world. At night, they sat together in the grand chamber. Sometimes they did not speak at all. They only listened to the soft hum of the living hive around them, a gentle music that promised life would continue no matter how far from home they were. One evening, as the twin suns set beyond the canopy, Seraphira turned to Elias. Home, she said softly. You, here, always. Elias smiled. He touched the flower crown above her head and nodded. Always, he said. They stood together under the blooming flowers, human and alien queen, two hearts growing roots in the same living soil, and above them, tiny seeds drifted through the jungle's night air, carrying the hope of new blooms into the endless stars.